the first and probably even the second sabbatical, I don't think my wife, I think she would say
Listen up,
the added
millionaires and
stress
soon to be
might
millionaires.
not have, maybe it
Do
probably
you ever
wasn't a
buy anything
sabbatical for
online?
her, right? She had to
I know
listen to
I
me,
do.
kind of stress about the numbers a little
In
bit
fact,
more.
some of my favorite
But
places
also where that
to
hit,
purchase
my
are
my
online.
first sabbatical kind of hit as I was selling real estate syndication software, and I
Do
was
you know some
selling
of those favorite
syndication
places
software
that you
for
buy
people buying
from?
apartments in
There's
Seattle
amazing
and
websites out there, and many of
San
them
Francisco.
are powered by
And there wasn't a
Shopify.
whole lot of people moving
Shopify is the
into Seattle and
global
San
commerce
Francisco during
platform that
COVID.
helps you sell at
And
every
so,
stage of
when
your
I,
business. From the
as
launch of
that
your
slowed
online
down and I
shop
ran out
stage
of
to the
things to
first
do,
real life store stage and all the
I
way
think
in
our net worth
between
at the time
to
was
we just
seven or
hit a
eight hundred
million
thousand,
dollar order stage.
right?
Yep,
And
Shopify's there to
so
help
that
you
was
grow.
very much a
Whether you're selling
sabbatical,
shipping supplies
and
or
my wife
promoting
wanted to
productivity
kind of work on
programs,
her marketing
Shopify
career a
helps you
little bit
sell
more.
everywhere. From their all
But
in
by the end of that,
one e-commerce
a
platform
year or
to
two
their
later with
personal
the
in-person
the
POS
appreciation
system,
of real estate during
wherever and
COVID,
whatever you're selling,
a year or
Shopify's
two
got you
later,
covered.
we were above $1 million.
Shopify helps you
And
turn
then it really
browsers
started
into
getting to,
buyers with the internet's
it's
best
supposed to
converting
be just a
checkout,
work
up to
gap, but
36% better compared to other leading e-commerce
we
platforms.
have a lot more flexibility
And
than
sell
we'd
more with less effort,
planned on.
thanks to Shopify.
Welcome, millionaires
Max,
and
your
future
AI
millionaires. You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled
about
podcast,
Shopify
the
is
show
no
where
matter how
you'll
big
hear
you
the
want to grow
stories and
Shopify,
interviews of
everything
everyday
you need to
millionaires.
build your
We'll
business
unveil their
with
decisions,
Shopify.
their strategies, and their portfolio allocation.
Sign up for a $1
Now to your
per month
host,
trial period at
Jace Mattinson.
Shopify.com/unveiled, all lowercase. Go to Shopify.com/unveiled now to grow your business, no matter what
Welcome
stage
back
you're
to
in.
another episode of the
That's
Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is
Shopify.com/unveiled.
episode number
And thanks
416.
again to Shopify.
This is the
for
podcast where
supporting
we dive
today's
deep into
episode.
the inspiring stories of self-made millionaires from all walks of life. We are your hosts, Jason Stacy, and each week we uncover the strategies, setbacks, and turning points that led these individuals to financial freedom. Whether you're just starting out or looking to level up your wealth building journey, join us as we share the secrets and wisdom from those who have built their fortunes from the ground up. Get ready to learn, be inspired, and take actionable steps towards your own success.
Listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with my dad, Jace Madison, and my mom, Stacy Madison.
Awesome. If you'd like to be on the show, send us an email, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. We're always looking for new, great, entertaining guests willing to share their story. And yeah, we've got a returning guest today, actually. His name's Anthon. When he first came on the show, episode 39, he had a net worth of around $750,000. Today, his net worth is over 1.7. In his working life, he's also taken a couple sabbaticals. So, you talk about putting away 10, 15, 20% in your 401k for retirement. Anthon has also taken the approach of putting 10, 15, 20% of his time away in a way and taking some mini sabbaticals along the way. Been working in tech sales and a few other things. And it's going to be a great episode. We get into kind of the details of the route he's chosen to take professionally, and very different from a lot of our guests, and very different from probably a lot of people that live on the coast. So he's living in the Midwest and kind of homesteading it. And so without any further delay, let's get right into the episode with Anthon. Welcome to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast and the show. We have Anthon, and Anthon came on our podcast in the very early days. Probably most of you actually have not even ever heard his episode. It was episode 39, so you have to go back now that I've introduced it and listened to it. At the time, he had net worth of $450,000. So we'll recap that a little bit. Allocation at the time was basically 45% in real estate, 30% in financial securities, 15% in cash, and some other, about 10% in some cryptocurrency. And yeah, he basically was working in sales. And we have some really neat clips to actually share later in the episode here from that episode. And just showing kind of the transformation and transition in the last 7 years. So, Anthon, with that, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you got going on now.
Yeah, it was fun to listen to that episode, and I knew the right things. I was making the steps. I still do have that whole life policy, but everything else, as I was listening to another podcast this morning, it's like, as long as you get the big things right and you keep moving in the right direction, it's kind of hard to mess up that momentum. So, it has been a little different of a career journey probably than most, and that's hopefully we'll get into that a little bit later. But just making sure that I think that the most common thing that I hear from a millionaire forum is they wish they would have taken the time earlier. They wish they would have trusted the numbers a little bit more, and I certainly wouldn't call myself retired, but I'm a lot closer than I thought I would be, and I'm just enjoying life with three young kids as much as you can, on next to no sleep. And I think we've experimented quite a bit with our work, and so I think that's kind of the interesting thing. I've taken a few sabbaticals, maybe three, yeah, two or three, depending on whether you count being a stay-at-home parent a sabbatical or not. Probably shouldn't. But my wife and I have been able to have the flexibility to focus on what we enjoy, and work kind of fit in where it can, rather than having that be the end all be all. So I think, as far as that goes, yeah, I've tried a few different things with work. I've tried a few of my own businesses here or there, probably dabbling a little bit more. I haven't had the commitment level, so we're kind of gearing up for the next push there, where I'm a little bit more committed in the long term. So
good deal. And we're going to get into all these fun details, but before we do, what's your net worth today?
It is just over 1.7 million.
Nice. So 450 7 years ago to 1.7. What is the breakup now of the 1.7? Is it still similar to what it was back then, or have you made some adjustments?
It is pretty similar. Real estate is at 58%, and stocks is around 27%. Cash is a little higher. I'm just starting on another, work gap, and so cash is a little higher. Crypto is a little bit higher, although I've sold from where we were 7 years ago. But the real estate initially jumped up pretty high, and I've been working hard to kind of funneling money into stocks to try and equalize that a little bit more. Haven't really sold real estate other than one home in North Carolina that we converted to. Essentially we sold it, bought in Missouri, and took the extra money and put it into syndications, which we kind of caught the tail end of that cycle, but we'll see. I'll probably get at least half the money back.
Nice. So talk to us. You made a comment before the show that I think is pretty remarkable. Your net worth is quite a bit higher now than the money that you've actually ever earned. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah.
By how much?
I would say it's probably about 500,000 higher. I'd say my career earnings are somewhere in the 1.2 million range.
Wow.
Over, the last 12 years.
Okay, so you've made on average 100K, but your net worth is 1.7. That is pretty remarkable. How much, from a delta standpoint, do you estimate that you've put into investments versus spent, so to speak? Because essentially that's what that delta is. And then, of course, you've had the compounding interest in the last decade plus to grow there.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the leveraged real estate played a big factor into that. And it was something that we actually discussed 7 years ago. And that leverage has only, back then I was probably 15% equity. Now I'm 55% equity, and I'm okay with that. Right. I've as far as how my investment strategies changed, we've taken a lot of chips off the table, so to speak. Even a lot of the, tech stocks that I held back then, I still hold today. And, I've been trimming a little bit, kind of trimmed at the right time, actually, with some of those mega caps that, that I've held for 8-10 years. But, really, as a conversation that my wife and I had, we recently had one of those syndications kind of went belly up. And, and I had the difficult conversation with her. Hey, I lost this, $65,000. And, And she said to me, well, you've made most of our money, so it's okay. I was like, well, wait a second, right? What for us has been our biggest factor of our net worth has been our ability to forego spending and save, right? Save that money, spend 55 to 60,000 a year. And so I was like, well, no, that's really you, right? You're okay with being on the journey, and it's your frugality that's allowed us to continue kind of down this path. So
that's awesome. So talk to us. Let's take a deep dive here into the career journey, and give us kind of the high level where you started and kind of navigated all that up until this point.
Yeah, I've always been in software sales to some extent. I think I really enjoyed the startups, but the work-life balance isn't great with the Series A companies. It's really fun, but you're kind of at the beholding of your venture capital investors, right? Sales is the first to get hired, the first to get fired. So it's a very bumpy journey. It's not a very smooth journey. In retrospect, working for Proofpoint was probably a really good move. And I think that's something that I'd like to, those big companies where you can just sign in, sign out, and go on your way. I've also, I've been able to kind of work on some of my passions, and so I sold software to the syndication space, which was pretty fun. To sell investor-facing dashboards has been fun. Fintech's been something I've really enjoyed. And then I've, dabbled in a partnerships role that was really just a sales role masquerading as a partnerships role. So sales role with less pay wasn't quite what I thought it'd be. And most recently worked for a marketing agency selling websites to well-funded tech companies, which was quite fun, and much more conducive to starting my own thing. My wife works in marketing, and so it's something that we could work on as a family business here moving forward.
So amidst all that, you've had a couple sabbaticals. You wouldn't say you're quote unquote retired, but you've had some of the taste of that retirement lifestyle. Talk to us a little bit about kind of those breaks that you had, what you did, the mindset about taking the time off, sabbaticaling, if we can even make that a gerund or whatever, to now.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things, and I don't really know that I discussed it, but it was right around the time that we had our last episode. I had a coworker that took the money from the acquisition that we'd had and took a sabbatical, hiked the Appalachian Trail, and that was just such a big thing in my mind that, man, you can do that. Like, here he was, like, he had, maybe 15,000 to his name, but he took that break, did that, and so it was something that my wife and I had talked about so much, and then finally, in 2021, when we sold our house in North Carolina and moved to Missouri. That's what we did. And so we decided we wanted, I tried to talk her into an RV for quite a while, and eventually we'd settled on, okay, well, I just want to do a month vacation. And so we listed our house, we packed all our stuff up, moved it into the garage, listed our house, and left the country and made the realtors do all the work. It was great. Had crazy offers that helped us spend a little bit more on our vacation and enjoy it. But we spent a month in Costa Rica with our one child at the time and just traveled all over the country, 4 different, week stays essentially. And, that was kind of our thing, right? I wanted to do something a little bit different. Then we moved to Missouri. We bought a fixer-upper. It was one of our things that we thought might be a passion. It's not. So now I work so that I don't have to. When I'm working, I'm thinking, okay, and now I can hire a contractor to do this or that. But it's been fun to redo a basement, do a bathroom, be able to kind of enjoy some of those nice things that I built. And I think we do really enjoy work, and that makes it easy to kind of trust the numbers a little bit more, right? While I don't specifically love where my career has gone as far as, loving the day-to-day aspect of it, I know that I'll work in the future. I do know that during the sabbaticals, I get 6 months in and I get a little itchy to do something, and so, but during the summer, right? I've got 5,000 square feet that I've got planted right now. I've got chickens and I'm trying to entice my son to start selling eggs and start his little business. And so it's a lot of those things that the lifestyle things are fun. We came to Missouri to be close to her family, which was something that was big on the lifestyle front. And certainly the amount of tech jobs in Missouri is not what it was in Utah or North Carolina, but and it's working remote is something that, while I don't specifically enjoy, it allows our lifestyle to be a lot more of what I enjoy. The slow lifestyle in Missouri has been great. We've really enjoyed the lack of keeping up with the Joneses and really just enjoying time with the family and time outside.
That's cool. So what was the longest about it? Was 6 months it?
No, I had about, well, that's good. I don't really know. I would say probably a year and 3 months, I think.
Oh, wow.
I guess that's between W-2. So my son was born, our second son was born in summer of 2022, and then yeah, I guess it was a year. It was only a year before I went back to a W-2, and then in the interim, I dabbled a little bit, 20 hours a week on some recruiting projects and a Chat GPT like call center QA software company that my friend was building. So, yeah, 9 months is probably the safest place to put that.
Total in the last 12 years, how much time would you say you've taken off?
I took off a year for my wife to work in 2021, and then probably 2 9-month stints when we moved to Missouri, and then last year when our second son was born, or sorry, 2 years ago when our second son was born. And then most recently, I'm planning on taking probably 6 months at least. So my plan here, after wrapping up a project in March, is to at least enjoy the summer with my kids. We have a lot of big summer plans, mostly local travel, and then in the fall we'll decide kind of where things go from here.
March, do you mean May? Wrap up project in May?
No.
Or you do it for another year?
No, I finished my last job kind of the mid March.
Ah, okay.
And then,
so you just finished it.
Yep. And with the plan of at least enjoying the summer. But we'll see. My wife's picked up some lucrative projects here, so working a week a month or so. So it might, we'll see how long that goes.
So is it fair to say that about 10, maybe 15% of your working years you've taken off essentially since graduating college thus far?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Wow. That's pretty sweet. Would you say that taking that time off the very first time changed your outlook at all for the ones subsequent?
Yep, definitely. I think, it just makes you a lot more, I think, in tune with what you're okay with as far as a working relationship, right? A W-2 relationship, and what you're not. You know that there's plenty out there. And I think that's how I view it, right? Is, realistically, with what we currently spend, we could retire. That being said, it's not, a really liquid net worth with real estate, and, it's not a great time to tap into that equity per se. But, I've kind of gotten to the point where it'll supplement a lot of that. So our real estate, brings in $2,500 a month, right, or $3,000 a month if the pref would pay out. But it really just allows us, if we only need 1,000 or a couple thousand, 3,000 a month, makes it pretty easy to to kind of fund our lifestyle and kind of fit work in where it needs to fit in rather than having it drive things. And right now, our kids still are a lot. We recently added a 5-month-old foster baby, and so that's been a big switch. And you know, back to the sleepless nights and kind of keeping us from. I don't know that I could even work at this point. I don't know how your wife does it. I was hoping she'd be on so I could ask her, like, what's your secret? But yeah, right now, and it's just kind of knowing that, time the compounding will get me to, kind of a more luxurious retirement, or at least a retirement where we're not living in Missouri if I want to move to a higher cost of living area to be closer to my family at some point. But it's just kind of trusting those numbers, right? That compounding, realistically, if I do nothing in 10 years, we'll easily be able to draw down, 100,000 a year, 120,000 a year. And, I know that my kids will stop wanting to spend time with me at some point in the somewhat near future. And so I've got at least another 10 years of earnings, kind of as they're in, middle school, high school. So being okay with kind of trusting the math and kind of taking things as they come. And it is a slippery slope, I'll say. And so I've also been working to kind of increase my mindset, and, I have well more than we need, but also trying to dream a little bit bigger and, work harder to make sure that they can have what they need. We had a conversation just this morning, actually, with my wife, where I'd sent her a picture of a motorcycle, like a little Honda 50, that I was thinking about buying for our son. And it was the second time I'd sent it to her, and she's like, "You're serious, aren't you?" And she's like, "I thought this was a joke." She's like, "You'd really spend that kind of money?" I'm like, "Well, we have the money. Our son needs, an outlet, and we've got the space for him to ride around in the yard, much to, my grass's chagrin. But we'll see. We'll see if I can talk her into it. It's kind of the other way around, maybe, than the relationship's typically been. So,
yeah, that's awesome. You've mentioned trusting the math and trusting the numbers. How have you been able to emotionally kind of get to that point where you do trust the numbers and you do trust the math, such that, you are thinking about, hey, do I retire now? Or, hey, how, maybe I only work for another 10 years, or, adjusting to kind of, our parents' generation's the exact opposite, right? They mostly are afraid to run out, and it seems like you think it's endless, to the point where you have complete trust and faith in the math, and have, even to this point, to take the sabbaticals that you have, that, hey, I can go get another job tomorrow if I really had to, but I'm going to take a month off. I'm going to take 3 months off. I'm going to take 9 months off right now.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't say that it's necessarily, as far as going back to work. Yes, I can go back to work, but, there's a little bit, I lose a little bit there, right? It's not that I'm, my resume's not in a spot to get a job with a top tier tech company by any means, right? And that's the balance I'm okay with. But it's just as you model out, right, that it's really that $2,500 a month coming in from our rental properties and some interest, in our investments, that it really just takes the delta down, right? There's not a big fluctuation in, that's something that we discussed on our first episode, is, getting to a point where my investments are bringing in more than my income, right? That the income isn't as important. And so it allows me to be a little more flexible there. And I don't think people don't realize the impact of just an extra $10,000, $20,000, what that does. Now, obviously for us, that's, when we're spending $60,000 a year, that's a bigger piece than, I think that's the secret sauce as much as anything, right? The tax code is also very favorable for, families that are in that income bracket. So, but it's just it's essentially a 1.5% withdrawal rate, right? If we do nothing. And so that the math is quite good. So I did get to hear Big Earn Karsten do a presentation a couple months ago, and might have gone way over my head. But it just really, as you model out the additional income, I think that's what kind of people forget. I think the society is built on working 40 hours a week and working until we retire, and it's hard. It takes a lot of work to try and, man, I'd love to find a 20-hour a week sales job. I'd love that. But it doesn't really exist. And so trying to find a creative way to kind of sit in that 50, 60,000 a year range while still having your flexibility. I think that's what I'm searching for. It's a little tough to find, and so I've supplemented it more with a year on and a year off. But that's also not a bad way to go. You make 120,000 or 150,000, and you start in July and you quit the next July and you take a year off. I mean, it's a good way to work with Uncle Sam and keep a lot of your money for sure.
Oh man.
Listen up, millionaires and soon to be millionaires. Do you ever buy anything online? I know I do. In fact, some of my favorite places to purchase are online. Do you know some of those favorite places that you buy from? There's some amazing websites out there, and many of them are powered by Shopify. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage and all the way in between to we just hit $1 million order stage. Yep, Shopify is there to help you grow. Whether you're selling shipping supplies or promoting productivity programs, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their personal in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, up to 36% better compared to other leading e-commerce platforms. And sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. What I love about Shopify is no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control of your business to the next level. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/unveiled, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/unveiled now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. That's shopify.com/unveiled. And thanks again to Shopify for supporting today's episode.
So I gotta ask, you've lived this lifestyle. Let's go back just for our listeners to kind of give some context. Did you have any student loans when you graduated at all that you had to pay off?
I did not. No, I did a summer sales job, and I think I graduated with around 20,000 in
the bank. Okay, so that helped out a ton. Do you have a mortgage currently, or do you have a paid for house?
Nope, I have a mortgage. Yep.
How much is your mortgage a month?
It is, I think we don't escrow, but I think if with escrow, it'd probably be $900 a month. I think $950 a month.
So you've got extremely low cost.
And that's for 2 acres and 2,500 square feet here in Missouri. So
yeah. So rural small town Missouri, you're living big, $900 a month if you escrowed, which is mind-boggling probably for most of the country to even wrap their head around, because I don't know that you can find a rental in most markets for less than $1,000. Bigger cities, right? So big difference. But we talk a little bit about the geo arbitrage, which you were participating in, and your money definitely goes a lot farther, which you're experiencing and have experienced, and it sounds like potentially will continue to experience, and then maybe down the road, if you do end up moving to a more higher cost of living area, it probably won't make as big of a dent like it would if you were to do it now and say it was double what you were paying now, or even triple for cost of living, at least in your housing. So what about the cars? Car payments at all?
No car payments. That was another funny thing as I listened to our episode is, you'd asked the most expensive car purchase, and I was, just very, very upset that I'd spent $17,000 on our 2013 Ford Fusion, and we still drive it to this day. So think it's about 250,000 miles. We will get a new car at some point this year, and we'll probably spend about 25,000 on it, but in cash. But we drive old cars still. I've promised my wife we'll get little bit newer one, but we're trying to decide if if we get a minivan or if we go to more of a small SUV. So
Okay. Any other, I mean, big expenses that you plan for or think about, or what about health insurance? How do you kind of manage that?
well, and that's where being in that kind of average income bracket right now is not a bad place to be. The ACA, I don't know. It's a little. I think it's a little frustrating to me as much as anything that somebody like me, right, who's making, I think for this year my projection initially was 120,000. That's what I went to the ACA, and because I was still on ACA healthcare just because my company was primarily overseas and didn't have a good healthcare option. So this year I was planning on 120,000, and I have $1,000 subsidy a month. So kind of mind-boggling to me that, at the time we were a family of four, applying for healthcare, making 120,000, and I was going to spend, 500 a month and have the government spend 1,000 on my behalf. I don't, I don't know that I specifically agree with it or wish that the government was subsidizing a person like my health insurance. But, $500 a month for health insurance is very reasonable.
What kind of
Um,
deductible comes with that? Just for
that's
context.
that's a I mean, it's essentially I'm covering. It's 15,000 out of pocket max for the family, 7,500
Okay.
for individuals. So it's catastrophic insurance
Yep.
essentially.
Yep. Okay.
But I certainly haven't. I've got enough at play that I'm not going to risk the Christian health chairs or anything like that. I think that's a little above my risk tolerance. But
Okay.
um,
Okay. Any other large expenses that you end up having to plan for a little bit better? Or I guess for the
yeah,
average person that may housing, car, health are probably the top three expenses for most people. Your food, I mean, you're living on a couple acres. Are you farming? Are you eating your own garden? Or
no, I supplement a lot of it, and we've gotten, a lot of our hobbies have kind of gone the homesteading route as far as preserving food and things like that. I mean, we've had a fun time, and worked really hard on some of those things. I did plant last year's potatoes and sweet potatoes, which was a fun, victory for me. So I guess I'm self-sufficient there. But, I also I did the last time I went back to work, it was because of, some expenses that I kind of hadn't budgeted. We don't really budget. And so I'm trying to be better at that. Like, I know I sent you this year's budget, included our anniversary trip. We went down to Cancun and stayed in a, nice $600 a night type of resort, which was not our usual, cup of tea, but it ended up being quite a bit of fun. We enjoyed it. We'd do it again. Maybe the kids not being there played into how much we enjoyed it. But, so I do forecast out some of those things as far as like investments that we're going to make. Really, the hard thing has been to stop investing. And that's been a hard transition to make. I think one of the times I went back to work was just because that's what I was, so I was working for a buddy and, um, just to kind of keep the lights on, and ended up investing $25,000 into his startup. And so, I ended up going back to work because I'd, spent a lot of the money that we were supposed to live off of. But, um, so I try to do better at forecasting the different, uh, investments that we're going to make during the year, just so I don't invest away all of our spending money. But, um, the really the big one is the house, and that's just a hard one to plan for. I'd love to have I think we'll probably move back to the suburbs at some point and have a nice house where our kids' friends want to come hang out at our house, maybe with a pool or something like that. Or, my wife's grandparents just sold their beach house here at Lake of the Ozarks, and that's or their lake house anyway. And so that's, it's something that I see in our future, 300, 500,000 at some point, but it's kind of hard to plan for. And one of our strategies always was to sell one of the rental properties and kind of fund that. So we'll see where we go. It's psychologically though, it's hard. It's hard to, there's $250,000, $300,000 equity there, but it's hard when that means you're cutting off the $600 or $700 a month from the rental property. So the drawdown psychology is really interesting for sure.
On the note of psychology, you talk about how you can't stop putting it, but you trust the math. Why are you still contributing? Is it just hard to get over the psychology of doing that as well? Or stopping that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just the ability to have that Roth and that tax-free money, especially with the real estate, kind of in contrast with the real estate, which isn't quite as tax efficient, on a sale anyway. But, yeah, I think that's, it's just hard to not, it's hard to, when there's the tax savings, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's just the tax savings that I'm like, well, if I can just lower my AGA just a little more, we'll get into this nice bracket, or we'll get this. Yeah, I mean, that's what it was last year there was a tax credit. If I could get our income below, there was a nice little tax credit. So there's some of that. And that's an interesting thing. Our HSA is now to the point that I probably need to stop funding it and need to start modeling a drawdown strategy a little bit more. We have, is it 85,000 in an HSA? So
nice.
We're
that's
getting
grown
to that
substantially.
It's, we don't spend a lot on healthcare, so we better, we better start figuring out a plan at some point. So,
do you invest that HSA too?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's all in the market.
Yeah. One other thing I want to touch on the psychology, you've been in sales basically your whole career. Typically, sales type personalities are a little more type A drivers. You've been able to manage, moving in a different direction, taking the time off, having a little bit different mindset. Has there been anything that you've done that has played a factor in that, or been, played a big role in you being able to kind of have, because I know you, I've known you for a long time, just for our listeners. No, I've known Anthon for almost 15 years, probably actually more than 15 years now. So
yeah,
going from that grinding type A, which I still have a lot of it myself, to like, hey, I'm going to take the step back, rural Missouri. I'm going to take these sabbaticals. How are you mixing all that?
Well, I think you have to have hobbies that are, time intensive. I think that helps. Because it's hard to not feel like you're working towards something. But I think also just seeing some of my life experiences. Die with Zero was a book that really resonated with me. My dad passed away about 5 years ago to Parkinson's disease. And so while, he died at 67, but, there was also a significant decline for, 8 to 10 years before that. And so I think it's just knowing that I've got that time, being able to take advantage of the opportunity. I think one of the things like this summer, my wife's parents recently retired. And so, the ability to go and travel with them while their health is good is, I just feel like you need to capitalize on some of those opportunities when they're there. And they don't have to require a lot of money, as far as my 6-year-old begs us again and again to go back to Costa Rica, which we will at some point. But at the same time, he'll enjoy just about as much a week at Lake of the Ozarks with camping with our kayaks and, a boat rental one day than he will, some of those things. And so it's just times and seasons. I think we would definitely like to spend more money at some point. And I think we'll get there, but not at the cost of, at the cost of working on my own terms, I think. And so, I think if I had a job that, if I had a better relationship with work, I think it would help. And that's something that I'm working on. I don't see myself as retired by any means. I'm just trying to force myself to enjoy the journey. And I'll say the first and probably even the second sabbatical, I don't think my wife, I think she would say the added stress might not have, maybe it probably wasn't a sabbatical for her, right? She had to listen to me, kind of stress about the numbers a little bit more. But also where that hit, my first sabbatical kind of hit as I was selling real estate syndication software, and I was selling syndication software for people buying apartments in Seattle and San Francisco. And there wasn't a whole lot of people moving into Seattle and San Francisco during COVID. And so, when as that slowed down and I ran out of things to do, um, I think our net worth at the time was 700 or 800,000, right? And so that was very much a sabbatical, and my wife wanted to kind of work on her marketing career a little bit more. But by the end of that, a year or two later, with the appreciation of real estate during COVID, a year or two later, we were above $1 million. And then it really started getting to, oh, well, this was supposed to be just a work gap, but, there's, we have a lot more flexibility than we'd planned on. And so I think it's really just trading off the trade-offs, right? I think if I had a business that I enjoyed and was able to kind of focus on what I wanted to focus on, and that probably paid even more than the sales positions, I think there's a play there. But I don't know. I always told myself, the next job, that was my last job. I was selling, six figure, even a seven figure deal. And so it really got me to the point where I could have a nice, promotion here, or, move up to the next tier as far as my career, which I've never, I kind of haven't focused on for so long. But, I don't know if a $250,000 role, I don't know. It hasn't been as motivating as I thought it might be. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. So, as you run your math, and I know you don't want to talk about where do you go from here, but I am curious, when you're running your math, I mean, where do you think your net worth lands down the road at quote unquote retirement, before you feel comfortable at fully drawing down and not having any other side projects or income, or coming out of retirement, so to speak, after sabbaticals to earn some more or whatever?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think 2.5 million has always been, a number that feels safe, right? But again, that's based on. I think the hardest part of that question is projecting our future expenses, right? It's, with young kids, it's still pretty low, but I don't know where things are going to go. I don't know where, I don't know where we'll be as far as the spending side of things. But I do know if I do nothing, and 1.7 or 1.75, right, in 10 years at 7.2%, right, that gets me to 3.5 million, and I have a hard time believing that's not enough, right? So I think that's kind of where, I know that within 10 years we'll be in a great place, as far as work being probably totally optional. And it's just for me about trying to do these little experiments where we design a life that we, don't need to retire from, right? And I think that's an interesting thing that, a lot of our travel in the US falls in the summer break when our kids are out of school. And, that's kind of at odds with my passions that don't require me to leave my house for more than a week at a time. So, but that's, I enjoy being home, right? I enjoy being able to have the projects and see the progress of, the garden of, different things that I'm working on. I'm probably as much in R&D in the garden than anything. So I like to just kind of play around with a bunch of different things and grow a ton of varieties and kind of experiment with different ways, and so it's just kind of a fun way for me to tinker in the shop without you know breaking the bank.
That's awesome. Well, let's wrap up with some of our rapid fire questions. And we know you went through some of these the first go around, but it'll be interesting to see if some of the answers change. And of course, we've got some new ones for you too. But what's the most expensive pair of shoes or pants that you purchased?
Probably about the same. $150 Johnson Murphys that I was married in.
Okay. Still wearing them?
Still wearing them. Yep.
Aging well.
Probably could do
Nice.
better at shining them up, but
What about the most expensive meal out?
probably a couple $100 with family. That's probably it. I do like to. I don't know. We just aren't in the phase of. Maybe we need to get a babysitter more so we can do it. But we don't have a lot of great food options in Missouri. That is one downside. So a couple
Yeah.
$100.
All right. What about the most expensive vacation or experience?
Definitely the trip to Costa Rica, although during COVID that was dirt cheap. So, I think Mexico, spending 5,000 for 5 nights was, way more than we'd typically spend, but I just think it was well worth it to celebrate and do things we wouldn't normally do and spend a little bit more money and just not have to worry about anything. Have people pick us up from the airport and kind of have the whole white glove treatment. That was nice.
Nice. What's slated for the future on the bucket list? Or do you have anything?
You know, we have a lot of things. This summer we have quite a bit, planned between Chicago, Tulsa, Bentonville, just, Great Smoky Mountains, things like that. So we have a pretty full slate this summer, and that's kind of by design. I felt like if I didn't plan it, then I would, my natural tendency would be to avoid, spending the money. So we tried to bucket that out and, make sure the budget's allocated. So, but man, big things on the list. I know we'll do Europe at some point in the near future. So, and we'll definitely do Costa Rica within the next couple of years. So,
Okay. What's the key lesson you learned from childhood?
I think just hard work and being grateful for what you have. I think that's my being able to have such a good relationship with my mom and see just how she's been enjoying her retirement. And as she had to go through all of these things, she had to learn a budget. She had to learn how to manage her finances and her investments. And that's something that I've worked with her a lot on. But just being okay, and she's still working. She works about 30 hours a week for just as a not work. Sorry, she volunteers for 30 hours a week, and she's essentially like tier 3 tech support for a family history company. And I'm like, you could just work for Ancestry and make 100,000 a year. And she's like, oh, I just love this. So it's just I see a lot of those similarities where it's like I've had the thought as I'm out there in the garden, just like I could be making a little more than 50 cents an hour if I turn this into a business or something. But I just it's fun to work, and it's fun to have the flexibility for it to not necessarily pay you like your day job. So
What other hobbies do you spend a lot of time doing, or is that kind of the main one?
we spend a lot of time outdoors. The kids are pretty active, so hiking and fishing, and we take our kayaks out quite a bit. We'll get it. We'll we're close enough. We'll get a jet ski at some point. I don't know if we'll get a boat. Well, he talked me into it maybe, but we'll for the most part we're pretty simple. So sit out on the hammocks and enjoy the yard. I mean, we're read a book. We're pretty simple there. But we do like to travel.
Okay. How'd you make your first buck?
Paper route, I guess. Yep.
How old were
Delivering
you?
papers. Probably Probably 8, I think.
Dang. Started young.
Yeah.
How much did you make? Do you remember?
Ooh, man. Like it was not, I think it was somewhere in the tune of like $3 a day. Gosh, and that was probably 50 newspapers, so an hour in the morning. Of course, that's with my dad folding them for us for free. So, I probably made three to $5 a day, somewhere like that.
Okay.
Um, Soon after that, I worked on a farm at $5 an hour doing farm labor. So
A
that was
little
good. But
raise,
but
huh?
that boss, I still talk to that farmer, and we do some stock trading together here and there. So
Nice. What's the craziest thing you ever done to earn money?
it's actually probably with the student loan question, I didn't get into the full story. I actually did have student loans, and I had used the student loans to trade stocks and actually options, and so I used the $10,000 student loan to trade Apple options in what is it, 2021, I think, or sorry, 2011, kind of right as Steve Jobs was kind of all that turmoil, and so I was trading options, and I got that account up to 100,000, and then I lost 50,000 in a week, and I haven't really touched options since. I've been disciplined, so it's been good. But yeah, that was definitely crazy. It's not. I hesitate to share that, but I feel like there's a lot of young investors that are trying the meme stocks that I think it's good to stay away from some of that.
Okay. Uh, let's see here. What's a closely held belief that you once had you recently changed your mind on?
I should have been prepared for that one, but I'm not. Hmm. I don't know that I don't know that I've changed my mind, but I've definitely come to terms. I think just the way that I was brought up was always the I guess the Christian metaphor of the burying your talents, right? I think that's something that just has come to mind for me a lot over the last 5 years as I've slowed down. And so I think it's okay to take some of those skills and let them kind of sit idly for a little while as you determine how you're going to deploy them next. I think, and I think that's really a better way to look at it, right? I know we've had a little bit more time to sit and rest and relax, but at the same time, that flexibility has allowed us to, a couple weeks ago, my wife picked up a really lucrative project because we were available, and they needed 40 hours in 4 days, and she could step in and be up to speed and kind of work through this kind of expert witness case. But just being okay with being flexible and spending time on what you enjoy rather than kind of following the status quo.
That's awesome. Any last words of advice for somebody who's just starting out on their journey or wants to retire
Yeah,
early or live like Anthon in Homestead, Missouri and live it up, baby?
I think it's just you have to make the sacrifices. You have to have a delta between your saving and your spending, or your earning and your spending, and the sacrifices that you make early just compound so much. And so I look at really that first couple years as we were both working. We've only been a one income household since our first child, right? So I think that's a sacrifice that we made for our family. But the the decision that we made to kind of get the ball rolling, I would say I worked a lot harder before our first interview 7 years ago. I wouldn't, I wouldn't call myself a hard worker today, but then when you look at my hobbies, I guess I probably am. I'm still out there working pretty hard with my hands, but just the sacrifices that you make early. It's never too late to get started, and You don't have to do everything right. You just have to avoid the big mistakes. And that'll put you on a good path to being able to homestead in Missouri someday.
That's awesome. That's Anthon, net worth of $1.7 million. Net worth was just $450 7 years ago on his first appearance. Thanks for on the show today.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website, millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.